and she runs and finds her acceptance, you know. And I feel like that's what a lot of us have done from our respective hometowns and so forth. We ran out to LA and just kind of found each other.
By the time No Rain turned Blind Melon into household names, Shannon Hoon was living the dream he'd chased for years. But dreams have a way of revealing who people really are. And what Hoon saw in one of his closest bandmates apparently disgusted him. This wasn't a casual falling out over creative differences. This was something that had been simmering long before the cameras rolled and the crowds showed up. The bigger they got, the worse it became. And when it finally boiled over, it threatened to destroy everything they'd built. The secret beginning of Blind Melon. Richard Shannon Hoon was born on September 26, 1967, in Lafayette, Indiana, to Richard and Nell Hoon. His father worked as a bricklayer, while his mother managed a local bar. He grew up alongside his two older half-siblings, Anna and Tim. From an early age, Shannon had a strong desire to stand out. Not long after his birth, the family relocated to Dayton, Indiana, where he spent much of his childhood. Like many sons named after their fathers, he shared his first name with his dad. To avoid confusion at home, he simply went by his middle name, Shannon, a choice that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Even as a teenager, Hoon had a personality that made him difficult to ignore. Rolling Stone would later describe him as the classic all-American kid of the era. He had a girlfriend, occasionally found himself in minor trouble, and enjoyed the rebellious freedom that came with being young. But beneath that ordinary exterior was someone constantly searching for a way to express himself. During high school, sports occupied much of his attention, but music was quietly becoming the force that would shape his future. His tastes leaned heavily toward the sounds of the 1960s and 1970s, influences that would later echo throughout Blind Melon's music. He admired artists such as the Grateful Dead, the Beatles, especially John Lennon, and Bob Dylan, all of whom helped shape his musical identity long before he ever stepped onto a professional stage. When Hoon finally began making music himself, however, his first chapter looked very different from the image most people associate with him today. In 1985, he joined his first band, a glam metal outfit with the unforgettable name Stiff Kitten. The spelling may have been unusual, but it fit perfectly within the over-the-top rock culture of the time. More importantly, the band gave Hoon his first real opportunity to develop as a singer, songwriter, and performer. It was during this period, before he had even turned 20, that he wrote a song called Change. At the time, it was simply another composition from a young musician trying to find his voice. Years later, it would become one of the defining songs of his career and eventually appear on Blind Melon's debut album. Music wasn't Hoon's only creative outlet. Long before smartphones made documenting everyday life effortless, he developed a habit of carrying a video camera everywhere he went. Beginning around 1990, he filmed almost everything. He recorded friends, road trips, rehearsals, and major life events. As his journey unfolded, he captured it all on tape, unknowingly creating a visual diary of the years that would change his life forever. One of the most significant moments he documented was his decision to leave Indiana behind. In 1990, at just 23 years old, Hoon packed up his belongings and headed west to Los Angeles. Looking back, it is easy to associate him with the laid-back, earthy image that would later define Blind Melon. But when he first arrived in California, he was chasing a very different dream. At the time, Los Angeles was booming. The city's glam metal scene had become a launching pad for major acts, and bands like Guns N' Roses had transformed local clubs into gateways to superstardom. Young musicians from across the country poured into the city, hoping to catch the same wave. Hoon was one of them. Not long after arriving, he attended a party where he performed Change. In the crowd that night were two fellow newcomers to Los Angeles, bassist Brad Smith and guitarist Roger Stevens. They had recently arrived with dreams of forming a band and were immediately struck by what they heard. The song stopped them in their tracks. Just a quick second before we continue. You know that feeling. Someone's name is right there. You know it, but you can't reach it. That specific experience has a biological explanation that researchers only recently discovered. It's not a memory problem, it's a clearance problem, and the difference matters enormously. Go to brainresearchreport.com, or it's in the description below. Once you understand what's actually happening, it gives you something real to work with. Back to the video. After hearing Hoon perform, they approached him about becoming their front man. Years later, Smith recalled how quickly Hoon made an impression. There was no trace of Hollywood ambition or manufactured coolness about him. He felt genuine, approachable, and completely untouched by the image-conscious culture that surrounded them. That chance encounter became the foundation of something much bigger. For Stevens and Smith, Hoon was exactly the person they had been searching for. For Hoon, it was the beginning of a partnership that would define his career. The chemistry was immediate, but so was the recognition that Hoon was unlike anyone they had ever met. Stevens would later describe him as wild from the very first day. He possessed a magnetic energy that naturally drew people toward him. The same unpredictable spirit that made him a compelling frontman also carried risks, creating a constant tension between creativity and self-destruction that would follow him throughout his life. Determined to turn their vision into a real band, the trio soon expanded. They recruited guitarist Christopher Thorne, who had recently arrived from Pennsylvania, and drummer Glenn Graham from Mississippi. With 5 members in place, Blind Melon officially came to life. Even the band's name carried a sense of mystery. Over the years, multiple stories emerged about where Blind Melon came from. One version claimed the phrase was something Brad Smith's father used when referring to local hippies around their hometown. Another traced the name to Blind Melon Chitlin, a character created by Cheech and Chong as a parody of legendary blues musician Blind Lemon Jefferson. Whatever the true story may be, the name stuck. With an identity established, the group got to work. They played clubs throughout Los Angeles, wrote songs relentlessly, and slowly built a catalog of material. Their breakthrough came when they recorded a demo tape that eventually found its way to a lawyer connected to Capitol Records. The music was impossible to ignore. The demo began circulating among executives, and before long, Blind Melon found themselves attracting serious attention from the industry. The collection of recordings, later known as the Goodfoot Demos, featured early versions of songs such as Tones of Home, Paper Scratcher, and Dear Old Dad. The recordings were strong enough to earn the band a major label contract, a remarkable achievement for a group that had only recently come together. For the first time, the future seemed wide open, but success did not arrive without complications. After signing with Capitol Records, Blind Melon entered the studio with producer David Briggs to begin work on what was intended to be their first major label release, the Sippin' Time Sessions. Almost immediately, the experience became frustrating. As recording continued, the band grew increasingly unhappy with the results. The music sounded polished and professional, but it lacked the raw spirit they believed defined them. Instead of feeling excited about the project, they felt disconnected from it. Still, an unexpected opportunity emerged during this difficult period. While Blind Melon struggled to find its footing in the studio, Hoon reconnected with an old acquaintance from Indiana. The man happened to be a friend of his sister's, who had also left Lafayette to pursue music in Los Angeles. His name was Axl Rose. By that point, Rose and Guns N' Roses had become one of the biggest rock acts in the world. Through that connection, Hoon suddenly found himself standing beside musicians he had once only admired from afar. The timing could not have been better. Before most people had ever heard the name Blind Melon, millions were already hearing Shannon Hoon's voice. Rose invited him to contribute vocals to Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion albums, placing the young singer on some of the era's most successful records. Hoon provided backing vocals on songs such as The Garden, Live and Let Die, and November Rain. He also shared lead vocals on Don't Cry, one of the band's biggest hits, and appeared prominently in the song's hugely successful music video. Combined with several high-profile concert appearances alongside Guns N' Roses, the exposure introduced Hoon to audiences around the world. Almost overnight, he became an artist people were paying attention to. Ironically, the Los Angeles hard rock scene had played a crucial role in bringing Blind Melon together. Without Hoon's move to California, without his performance of Change at that party, and without the connections he made along the way, the band may never have existed at all. Yet there was one major problem. Blind Melon never saw themselves as a hard rock band. While metal and grunge dominated the West Coast, Hoon and his bandmates were drawn towards something different. Their influences came from folk, classic rock, psychedelia, and the free-spirited sounds of earlier generations. They respected the scene around them, but they did not want to be defined by it. If they were going to become the band they believed they could be, they needed to break away from the expectations of Los Angeles and find an environment where their own identity could truly take shape. Success opened dangerous doors. After the disappointment of the Sippin' Time sessions, Blind Melon knew something had to change. Los Angeles had helped bring the band together, but it was no longer the place where they could grow into the group they wanted to become. So they packed up and left the California hard rock scene behind, heading instead to Durham, North Carolina. The move turned out to be exactly what they needed. Away from the noise and expectations of Los Angeles, the band finally had room to focus on developing their own identity. Their sound became more refined, blending folk, rock, and psychedelic influences into something that felt uniquely theirs. For the first time, Blind Melon seemed fully prepared to create the album they had been chasing from the beginning. To help bring that vision to life, they teamed up with producer Rick Parashar, who had already made a name for himself through his work on Pearl Jam's landmark debut album. 10 recording sessions took place in Seattle, Washington, where the band tracked much of the album live in the studio, hoping to capture the natural energy of their performances. The result was Blind Melon, released in 1992. For Shannon Hoon, the album represented years of hard work, sacrifice, and belief. Like many young musicians finally reaching their big moment, he imagined success would arrive quickly. It didn't. Despite strong reviews and a major label push, the album struggled to gain traction. Blind Melon had finally released their debut record, but the breakthrough they expected never came. Months of effort seemed to be leading nowhere, and the band found themselves stuck in limbo. Then MTV entered the picture. In the early 1990s, music videos could make or break a career. A song might go unnoticed on the radio, but the right video could turn an unknown band into a household name overnight. At first, Blind Melon released Tones of Home as the album's lead single. The song failed to make much of an impact. Their follow-up single, No Rain, initially seemed destined for the same fate. But the band kept pushing forward. Even without immediate success, they decided to film a music video for No Rain. At the time, it probably seemed like just another promotional effort. In reality, it would become one of the most iconic music videos of the decade. The video featured a young girl named Heather DeLoach, dressed in an oversized bee costume, wandering through a world where she never quite fit in until she finally found her place. Something about it connected with people. MTV embraced the video and played it relentlessly. Almost overnight, Blind Melon went from a band struggling to gain attention to one of the most recognizable acts in rock music. Suddenly, No Rain was everywhere. The success transformed the band's career. Concert crowds grew larger, media attention intensified, and opportunities seemed to appear from every direction. Yet with that success came a new set of challenges. The rock and roll lifestyle that had once seemed exciting and glamorous was now impossible to avoid. Throughout it all, one of the few constants in Shannon Hoon's life was his longtime girlfriend, Lisa Krause. The two had known each other since high school, long before record deals, MTV fame, and sold-out concerts entered the picture. As Hoon's world became increasingly chaotic, Lisa remained a source of stability. She represented home, familiarity, and a connection to the life he had left behind in Indiana. Unfortunately, stability was becoming harder and harder to maintain. During the next 2 years, Blind Melon spent much of their time on the road. They toured alongside major artists such as Neil Young and the Rolling Stones, reaching audiences they could only have dreamed of a few years earlier. Professionally, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Personally, it was another story. Alcohol and drugs increasingly became part of life on tour, and no one struggled more than Shannon Hoon. His substance abuse worsened as the band's popularity grew, leading to repeated stays in rehabilitation facilities and creating tension both within the group and in his personal life. Ironically, before No Rain had transformed Blind Melon into stars, the band had been opening for acts like Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, and Soundgarden. Once their own success arrived, they were finally ready to headline shows themselves. But the pressures that came with that success were proving difficult to handle. Like many musicians before him, Hoon found himself trapped in a cycle of addiction. Life on the road was exhausting, demanding, and often isolating. Drugs and alcohol offered temporary escape, but they also pushed him deeper into trouble. By May 1994, he entered rehab once again, hoping to regain control. Sadly, the recovery did not last. Just a few months later came Woodstock, '94. The festival was intended to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the legendary 1969 Woodstock gathering. Organizers envisioned a modern version of the original event, one that would honor its themes of peace, music, and community. Reality turned out very differently. Where the original Woodstock reflected the optimism and idealism of the late 1960s, the 1994 version reflected a very different era. The atmosphere was darker, the music more aggressive, and the sense of unity far less pronounced. Blind Melon arrived at the festival during one of the most turbulent periods of Hoon's life. Fresh out of rehab, he took the stage looking visibly detached and unfocused. Rumors circulated that he was under the influence of hallucinogens. Dressed in his girlfriend's white dress, with barrettes in his hair and heavy eyeliner around his eyes, he embodied the unpredictable image that had become synonymous with his public persona. For some fans, it was fascinating. For others, it was deeply concerning. By that point, Hoon's struggles were no secret. Band members had repeatedly tried to help him. Roger Stevens later recalled efforts to stage interventions and encourage treatment. Yet Hoon often resisted those attempts, making it increasingly difficult for the people closest to him to reach him. His mother, Nell, had witnessed the warning signs long before fame entered the picture. In the years leading up to his move to Los Angeles, she watched his battles with drugs and repeated encounters with law enforcement grow more serious. She frequently feared that every late-night phone call or passing ambulance might bring devastating news. As painful as those fears were, the years ahead would only become more complicated. Then, in July 1995, a new chapter began. Hoon and Lisa Krause welcomed a daughter, Nico Blue. The timing felt significant. Nico was born just as Hoon was emerging from another rehabilitation program, and for a moment, fatherhood seemed to give him a renewed sense of purpose. He spoke openly about wanting to be present for his daughter and becoming the kind of father she deserved. Friends and family noticed changes. The birth of Nico appeared to have a powerful effect on him. He worked harder to stay healthy and made genuine efforts to confront the addictions that had dominated so much of his adult life. But change was never simple. The demands of touring kept him away from home for long stretches, making it difficult to maintain the stability he desperately wanted. Even so, there were signs of hope as Blind Melon prepared for the next phase of their career. The band relocated to New Orleans to begin work on their second album, Soup. The city's atmosphere had a profound influence on the music. Far removed from Seattle's grunge scene and Los Angeles's hard rock culture, New Orleans encouraged experimentation. The band embraced it. Soup incorporated horns, banjos, mandolins, and a variety of other textures that expanded their sound in unexpected ways. Rather than chasing current trends, Blind Melon leaned further into their own artistic instincts. At a time when grunge dominated popular music, they deliberately chose a different path. They wanted listeners to hear who Blind Melon really was. When the album's lead single, Galaxy, debuted at number 25 on the Billboard charts, it seemed like a promising start. Yet despite positive reviews and strong support from fans, Soup failed to match the commercial success of the band's debut. Most importantly, it never produced another phenomenon like No Rain. Still, Blind Melon refused to slow down. As Soup worked its way through the market, the band returned to the studio to record additional material. One project involved a cover of Out on the Tiles for Encomium, a tribute album honoring one of their greatest influences, Led Zeppelin. But another recording would take an even more surprising path. Instead of covering a famous rock classic, Blind Melon participated in Schoolhouse Rock. Rocks, a compilation featuring alternative bands performing songs from the beloved educational cartoon series. For their contribution, they recorded 3 is a Magic Number. On paper, it seemed like an unusual choice. The song wasn't released as an official single, and few expected it to attract much attention. Yet it quickly became one of the standout tracks on the entire album. Fans embraced it, critics praised it, and over time it became one of Blind Melon's most beloved recordings. Its popularity eventually extended beyond music. Hollywood began licensing the song for film soundtracks, introducing it to entirely new audiences. Years after its release, it continued appearing in movies and helping keep the band's music alive. From the outside, Blind Melon seemed to be thriving. Their songs were reaching millions of listeners. Their reputation as musicians continued to grow. They had survived industry setbacks, commercial pressure, and changing musical trends. But behind the scenes, Shannon Hoon was still fighting battles that fame, success, and even fatherhood had not been able to fully erase. And those battles were about to become impossible to outrun. Inside Shannon's final 24 hours. When Blind Melon prepared to hit the road in support of Soup, Shannon Hoon had only recently completed another stay in rehab. Looking back, many people questioned whether he should have been touring at all. Some believed he had been pushed back into the spotlight before he was truly ready. Those closest to him, however, remembered things differently. Guitarist Roger Stevens later maintained that Hoon genuinely wanted to return to the stage. From his perspective, Shannon believed he was ready. He wanted to perform, support the new album, and continue moving forward with the band he had worked so hard to build. Still, concerns remained. There was enormous pressure surrounding the Soup tour. The band, the label, and management all had a vested interest in keeping the momentum going. At the same time, addiction specialists reportedly warned that sending Hoon back on the road so soon could seriously jeopardize his recovery. In an effort to balance both realities, the group came up with a compromise. A professional counselor was hired to travel alongside the band, providing support and helping Hoon navigate the daily challenges that came with life on tour. On paper, it seemed like a reasonable solution. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. At first, things appeared to be working, but before long, tensions began to grow. Hoon became increasingly hostile toward the counselor, and the relationship quickly deteriorated. Members of the band grew concerned that the situation might eventually turn confrontational. After just 1 week, the counselor was gone. The safety net that had been put in place to help protect Hoon's sobriety had disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. With the tour moving forward and no counselor accompanying them anymore, Blind Melon did what musicians often do. They kept going. Night after night, they climbed on stage and gave everything they had to their audiences, determined to make the most of the opportunity in front of them. By October 20th, 1995, the tour had brought them to Houston, Texas, for a performance at a club called Numbers. Despite the struggles that followed him off stage, Shannon remained deeply committed to his music. Performing wasn't just part of his job, it was a fundamental part of who he was, which is what made that night's performance so troubling for those around him. Every musician has difficult shows. Every singer experiences off nights. This felt different. According to guitarist Christopher Thorne, Hoon appeared to be under the influence before he even stepped onto the stage. His performance lacked the focus, energy, and control that normally defined his presence as a frontman. For a man known for completely immersing himself in every show, the difference was impossible to ignore. To those who knew him best, it was another painful reminder that the battle he had been fighting for years was far from over. The following day, October 21st, Blind Melon traveled to New Orleans for a scheduled performance at Tipitina's. The city held special meaning for the band. It was where they had lived while recording Soup, and returning there felt almost like coming home. But the mood surrounding the group was noticeably different. The disappointment from the Houston performance lingered heavily over the band. Hoon, in particular, seemed affected by it. Later that evening, he left on his own and wandered through the streets of New Orleans. What happened during those hours remains unclear. The exact substances he consumed have never been fully established. What is known is that whatever he took proved to be fatal. Sometime during the early morning hours, Hoon returned to the tour bus and climbed into his bunk. Unknowingly, he had already taken the final steps of his life. Years later, viewers of the documentary All I Can Say would see footage capturing that night, including Hoon's final walk back to the bus. The images are haunting in retrospect, showing a man moving through what would become the last chapter of his story. The next morning, the band's sound engineer went to wake him for sound check. Something immediately seemed wrong. Hoon was unresponsive in his bunk. Emergency services were called right away, and an ambulance rushed to the scene. But by the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Shannon Hoon could not be revived. On October 21st, 1995, at just 28 years old, the voice that had helped define Blind Melon was gone. Shannon Hoon truly hated his Blind Melon co-star. When Blind Melon's debut album finally arrived on September 22, 1992, the buzz that had surrounded the band during their association with Guns N' Roses the year before had largely faded. The members had convinced themselves that success would come quickly, but reality had other plans. Looking back, guitarist Christopher Thorne admitted they had been living in something of a fantasy. They expected the album to explode the moment it hit store shelves, only to discover that building a career required far more than recording great music. Suddenly, they found themselves crisscrossing the country, playing show after show, promoting the record, and learning firsthand just how much work went into getting people to listen. They loved performing and embraced the adventure of life on the road, but beneath the excitement was a growing pressure they had never anticipated. Thankfully, Capitol Records understood exactly what kind of band they had signed. The label never expected Blind Melon to become an overnight sensation. Instead, they saw potential in a slow and steady climb and were prepared to support the group through years of touring if necessary. And that climb was already beginning. Drummer Glenn Graham Smith later recalled those early touring days with a sense of nostalgia. The band even jokingly named one of their tour shirts the Crammed in a Van Tour, a fitting description of life on the road. But despite the long drives and cramped conditions, they could see the momentum building. Each time they returned to a city, the crowd seemed noticeably larger than before. Word of mouth was spreading, and more people were discovering the band with every stop. For Smith, it remains one of the most magical and rewarding chapters of his entire musical career. Then came the moment that changed everything. Around that time, the band joined forces with director Samuel Bayer, fresh off the success of Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit video, to create a music video for No Rain. The song was already a crowd favorite during live performances, but the video gave it an entirely new life. Combining footage of the band playing in an open field with a whimsical storyline inspired by the album artwork, it introduced the world to the unforgettable B-Girl. The video struck a chord with audiences almost immediately. By the summer of 1993, No Rain had become a massive hit, launching Blind Melon to the top of the American charts. But as the band's dreams were finally becoming reality, new problems were beginning to surface behind the scenes. Success brought money, and money brought difficult conversations. One of the biggest sources of tension involved songwriting royalties. According to Glenn Graham Smith, disagreements over how songwriting credits should be divided created a deep divide within the group. Shannon Hoon wanted credits assigned according to individual contributions, while others preferred a more collective approach. Since both Hoon and Smith had contributed heavily to the band's material, the debate quickly became personal. Smith later reflected that some bands avoid these conflicts altogether by splitting everything evenly, regardless of who wrote what. In his view, that approach helps prevent the resentment and bitterness that can quietly build over time when members start comparing contributions and paychecks. The dispute became a serious challenge for the band, but it never tore them apart. Bassist Brad Smith later described the negotiations as difficult and emotionally draining, yet ultimately productive. After a hard-fought battle, the members found common ground through compromise. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was one everyone could accept. And when the dust settled, the band emerged from the conflict intact, proud that they had managed to work through one of the toughest tests they had faced since finding success.